Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something I think a lot of us think about, uh, getting better at speaking English.
It's a big one.
Yeah, for sure. And we're looking at this episode of Best English Talk. It's called Speak English with Confidence. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, it's really practical, almost like a mini lesson crammed into a podcast episode.
I like that, a mini masterclass. All right, so where do we even begin with this one?
Well, the host, Mukhtar, he starts off talking about something that I think a lot of people can relate to, this like fear of making mistakes.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've totally been there. You freeze up.
It can be so paralyzing, but Mukhtar's approach is really encouraging. He's like, hey, mistakes are totally normal. Think about it. Like when we were little kids learning to talk, we didn't just start speaking perfectly, right?
Right, we were like little gibberish machines for like years.
Exactly. But we learned by trying, by making those mistakes.
And I mean, nobody was like judging us for it, as toddlers.
Yeah, exactly. And Mukhtar, he really emphasizes that. He's like, look, don't be afraid to experiment, to make those mistakes because that's how you learn. It's about progress, not perfection.
Yeah, I love that. It's about the journey, right?
Absolutely. And then he goes on to give like 5 super practical tips to help you gain confidence.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about these tips. What were they?
Okay, so he talks about thinking in English, practicing in front of a mirror, like actually looking at yourself when you talk. Then he mentions listening and repeating, so like mimicking what you hear. And then, of course, actually getting out there and joining conversation.
So immersion, basically.
Yeah. And the last one, he circles back to it, is like really letting go of that fear of making mistakes. He kind of weaves it throughout all the tips.
That's such a good point. I feel like that's the foundation, right? Like if you're constantly terrified of messing up, you're never going to actually, open your mouth and speak.
Exactly. And what I think is so cool about these tips is that they work on like multiple levels. It's not just about speaking more fluently. It's about building that inner confidence too.
Yeah. It's like, as you get more comfortable with the language, you naturally start to feel more confident about using it, right?
Right. And one of the tips that I found super interesting was that whole thinking in English thing. I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but it's actually harder than you'd think.
Oh, tell me about it. I mean, like, how do you even begin to like rewire your brain to think in a different language?
Yeah, well, Mukhtar's point is that like if you're constantly translating in your head, it slows you down. It makes your speech sound like less natural.
So it's almost like you're creating this extra step in the process.
Exactly. So the goal is to like start forming your thought directly in English, even if it feels super weird at first.
Okay, so how do you actually like train your brain to do that? Are there any like exercises or techniques?
Oh, there are tons. Like one thing you could try is like describing your surroundings in English. Just like look around you and say what you see.
So like narrating your life, basically.
Kind of, or think in English while you're doing like mundane tasks. Like, okay, I'm brushing my teeth, now I'm making coffee. Stuff like that.
I like that. It's like sneaking in practice without even realizing it, right?
Exactly. And another tip that Mukhtar gave, it's a little bit out there, but it's practicing in front of a mirror.
Oh my gosh, yes. I have to admit that one made me chuckle a little bit. It sounds a bit
Yeah, no, I get it. It sounds a little funny. But there's a method to the madness.
Okay, explain this to me. Why the mirror?
So think about actors, or public speakers. They use mirrors all the time. And the reason is that seeing yourself articulate, it helps with your pronunciation, like seeing how your mouth is moving. But there's also a psychological element to it.
So like you get used to seeing yourself speaking English and it becomes less scary?
Exactly. It's like, the more you see yourself doing something, the more confident you become. And it's actually backed by research. There's a whole bunch of studies on self-perception and confidence.
I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's like giving a presentation. If you've practiced it in front of a mirror a bunch of times, you're going to feel way more confident on the actual day.
Exactly. So, even though that mirror tip might seem a little silly at first, it's actually like a really powerful tool for building confidence.
I'm totally going to try that one. And you know what else I liked about Mukhtar's approach? He doesn't just give you tips. He actually gives you like a little speaking practice right there in the podcast.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He has you repeating phrases like, hello, my name is Mukhtar. I love learning English. I practice speaking every day.
It's so simple, but it's so effective. And I feel like it kind of ties everything together. It gets you thinking in English. It gets you speaking out loud.
Yeah, and it like subtly reinforces that whole practice makes perfect idea.
Exactly. It's like he's like weaving all these different principles together into this like really practical exercise.
So smart. And, I think the biggest takeaway from this whole episode, the thing that really stuck with me, is that it's all about empowering yourself.
Oh, yeah.
It's about like taking ownership of your language learning journey and realizing that each time you speak, you're building fluency, you're building confidence.
It's a process, right? Like you're not going to become fluent overnight. But every little step, even the mistakes, they all add up.
Absolutely. It's all part of the journey.
So for everyone listening out there, I want to leave you with this question. What's one small step you can take today, right now, to practice speaking English?
That's a great question. I mean, it could be anything, right?
Yeah, like maybe try describing your dinner tonight in English, or listen to an English podcast while you're doing the dishes, or hey, try that mirror technique.
Love it. It all adds up.
Exactly. Remember, every small step gets you closer to your goal. So get out there, practice, and have fun with it.
That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And hey, if you try any of those things, let us know. We'd love to hear about your progress.
Yeah. Share your journey with us.
All right. That's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.